Hello, everyone. It's time to eat, drink, and be merry with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy.
Hey, everybody. It is wine time with Peggy here on Big Blend Radio. Peggy is here every first Wednesday because every Wednesday is Wine Wednesday, but you might as well start with the first Wednesday and keep working your way through the month. Sounds good to me. Peggy and her husband, Curt, own LDV Winery in Arizona. You can go to the tasting room in Scottsdale, go enjoy some art, some wine tasting. They have all kinds of special events, but their vineyard is actually down in the Chiricahua foothills in southeast Arizona. So it's kind of near Chiricahua National Monument. If you're on a road trip, they do have their winery there, but I do believe that's only by appointment only. So I encourage you to go to their website, ldvwinery.com. May is exciting. It's Mother's Day. Memorial Weekend comes up this month. Plus, and of course, Mother's Day, Nancy's birthday, that's important. But Wine Day comes up on a National Wine Day, May 25th, is a big deal. So excited to have you here, Peggy, because we've got a lot to talk about in regards to the world of wine, right?
Absolutely. We're going to go around the world in wine in a short amount of time this month.
Awesome. I love this, though. First off, let's go to the vineyard. What is happening in the vineyard? Have you had weird weather or things getting calmer now after the crazy winter storms?
It was a crazy winter, but things are calming down. What's interesting, I've talked about how much rain we got in the Chiricahua Mountains at the vineyard, which put off us budding out. But now all of the varieties are budded out and starting to flower. And, most fruits flower, as you know, and because I grow pomegranates, and I brought this beautiful little flower, and you see where the pomegranate is starting to grow. So in the vineyard, we're getting much smaller little flowers with the grapes are starting to begin to show. So
cute.
And typically it happens, each variety of wine comes out at a different time, typically in a year. But this year, because we're so late, all of them decided, we're going to flower and move and start growing all at once to catch up from this crazy winter that they have. So the vineyard is really starting to liven up with beautiful green foliage and tiny little flowers where the grapes are going to grow. The other thing in May, I wanted to say, maybe towards the end of May, we'll start shoot thinning, which is when we actually go vine by vine through the vineyard and take off, how on plants, little suckers will grow that you really don't want because they take a lot of the energy away from where you want the energy to go, which is the main vines and the main shoots off from that on that vine. So we'll go plant by plant and to remove those shoots that we don't want to take any energy away. So
it's like deadheading in a way, like what we do in our gardens. Exactly. So do you go through the vineyard, go shoot, sucker,
get out of there, sucker.
Cut it out. Yeah. That's it. Nancy heard this, and I think it was a previous interview or somewhere. She heard that vineyards don't necessarily need pollinators like other farmers need pollinators. Is that true?
That is very true. So they are self-pollinating. And I'm not crazy about bees, particularly because bees we don't need them to pollinate the vines, and they are a nuisance basically when the fruit is really getting ripe, because they like to poke little holes in each of the grapes. And so that's not a good thing. But and they are horrible during harvest because you get stung a lot. And so you got to really cover up because the bees are all over the vineyard.
Oh, wow. I bet you have EpiPens everywhere in case.
Exactly. We had, not on our vineyard, but on a neighboring vineyard, he didn't know he was allergic to bee stings, and he died because the vineyard didn't have an EpiPen. He was not aware he was allergic. And so it's kind of scary.
That's a serious, wow. Nancy's allergic to bees.
Oh, really? Okay. So she knows.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So she won't come at harvest, but she'll come at this tasting time.
exactly, exactly.
She'll come at tasting time. Well, I love this that we're going to talk about new versus old, wines, new world versus old world. But I
Right.
know one of the terms you wanted to talk about today is terroir.
Right,
Am I
which
even pronouncing it right?
yeah,
Ooh,
no, you did well. And
maybe.
we've talked about it before, but I thought it was important to kind of have a refresher because it really relates to this topic of old world versus new world. But as we've talked about in the past, the idea of terroir,
Mm,
and particularly as it relates to growing fine wine, is that you choose a place because of its terroir to plant your grapes. And that is everything from the type of winds and airflow in the area, to soils, the type of soils, the quality of the soils, the water, and everything else. So everything that could influence the growing of those vines is related to terroir.
mm,
And each place has its own terroir. And particularly when you're thinking about old world, the term related to wines, old world is all about terroir. It's very terroir driven. And new world is all about the grape and the varieties and the type of grapes. So that's one major distinction between old world and new world. When you're also thinking about old world versus new world, there's certain regions that are considered old world, and really those are places where it's considered the birthplace of wine. So
mhm.
France and Spain and Italy and Germany, Portugal, Austria,
Oh,
even
yeah.
places like Georgia and Romania and Hungary, Switzerland, are all considered old world countries, and their winemaking within that are considered old world. On the
Oh,
on the other hand, you have new world wines. These are kind of defined as countries that are considered colonies of the old world, right? So the United States, New Zealand and Australia, Chile, South Africa, Australia, those are considered more new world. And China, which is an up and growing region, is considered more new world
mm.
wines. So
Oh, so
those
I heard China does a lot of collecting of wines that they,
China is really a fast-growing region. It's considered a new world region of the world. And actually, when you look at the top 5 wine producers in the world, there's the obvious ones, right? Top in the world is France, followed by Italy and Spain. And those are all old world, considered old world wine regions. But then comes the US, and then comes China. And
wow.
it is actually a fast growing wine region, as well as they're collectors there, but they're also growing grapes and making wine. So you're going to see a lot more of them.
Wow, I had no idea China was so big. I always think, sake and whiskey and beer,
Right, right,
you know,
right. But
for on the from the, when we think of Asia as a in generality, that area of the world. I always thought
right,
more of that than wine. But
right.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of exciting. And the other thing about the difference between the two regions is when you think about old world, most of those countries have a hard time having their grapes ripen because of the weather, and the change in weather has really impacted them. They tend to be more earthy, more
Mhm.
mineral tasting. They're lighter bodied because they can't get the fruit ripe as well as we do here. The acid level in the wines are a little bit higher than what you see in New World wines. They're lower in alcohol, and really those regions are driven by the rules and regulations that are
Oh.
put on them by the government. And in New
Hmm.
World, like the US, it's all about the grape. As I said, the fruit is much more forward in the wines. They're fuller body with bolder flavors because we can get our grapes riper. So there's lower acid and higher alcohol content in a lot of New World wines.
Mm.
And, like the US, we have this entrepreneurial spirit to winemaking. So there's a lot of experimenting in the wines and winemaking process that you don't see in old
Mm.
world wines.
Well, I think old world wines too, that those regions kind of drink more in a way. Like it's kind of part of life. So if they have a higher alcohol content, nothing will get done in France
Right.
or
That's true.
Greece.
Exactly. Exactly.
Or-
Yeah, but they're lower, so you can drink more because they're lower in alcohol and
Yeah,
lighter wines.
yeah.
So,
Well, they do. Yeah, they do pretty much at meals, right? For like the whole family from what
right,
well, yeah.
right. So, my palate tends to favor New World wines because I like
Mhm.
big, bold flavors. And that's what we produce at LDV Winery because our vineyard really grows intense fruit, really high
Mm.
quality fruit. So I appreciate old world wines, but it's not where my palate and where
I'm
my
with
go-to
you.
wines. Yeah.
I love your wines. I was just
Yeah.
like, oh, yay, go Arizona. Because I always get excited talking about it because I want people to understand, obviously we have 50 states with wine, but you guys are rocking it. I mean, the state, you guys
Thanks.
are part of that. And I just feel like it's so exciting that people can realize that wine can come out of the desert
Right.
and, and quality wine, not just you know, in
Tourist
Willy
wine.
Wonka. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Good one. Good one. Thanks for that. That's a good term. I like that. But you're really doing quality. And I'll never forget that evening. I was just like, everybody just leave me alone. I just want to sit with this. It's my bottle. But the new versus old wine, this is interesting about the world of wines because it really kind of gives us an idea of how old wine is, how much it's progressed, and it kind of
Right.
tells the history of man, of
Oh,
moving and exploring.
I agree. And summertime is coming and people are planning trips and traveling. You travel to wine regions and you really get and enjoy the wine of that particular region
Mhm.
because it really tells the story and the history of that region, I think. And a few years ago we hosted a river cruise down the Danube River
Wow.
and we're able to bring our wines on the boat, and a lot of our wine club members went along with us. And I had an opportunity to do some workshops on the boat and do a comparison of old world versus new world wines, particularly comparing them to our wines. And what a fun trip to do for us, but for people on the boat to learn about old and new world, because the people on the boat were from all over the world. And
Oh,
so, yeah, plan
that's
a river
really
cruise.
cool. That's really
Yeah.
cool to go down there and then for you to host workshops. Here you are with the new wines going through the old wine country.
And it was great. And to
You
get
go,
people to,
girl.
I know. And so the Danube River runs through both Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Slovakia.
Mm.
So we talked about the wines from all of those countries and then compare and tasted them side by side, like a Hungarian wine alongside our Viognier. And so I got feedback from people from all over the world on our wines and talked about the nuances of old world versus new world. It was a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing when you think about it,
Yeah,
just being able to float. That's the other thing, just to be able to float and drink wine. That's
right.
to me like sip and chill out. You're not driving. You don't have to, you could just sit and watch the world go by. That's the best way, wine in the world.
So we're
So,
sitting on the boat talking, and the hillsides outside the window were filled with vines of Germany and Austria and so on. It was just
mm.
incredible. When
Oh,
a
no, go ahead.
fun wine to compare, like if you wanted to try this on your own and to have a feel for what the difference between old world versus new world is, I would choose a Riesling, and particularly choose an old world Riesling like from the Wachau Valley of Austria. They're known for their Gruner Veltliner, which is a type of wine that they make, which is a Riesling, and choose a Riesling from the New World, like from Washington State or the Finger Lakes area is becoming known for their Riesling, or California, and try them side by side, because The difference in, it's still the same grape, it's still Riesling, but the difference between an old world Riesling and a new world Riesling is so different. And it's kind of fun to really see the difference. So for example, you might pick up some exotic fruits in the Riesling from the old world, whereas a new world might be very dry, bone dry, and it could range to a dessert wine, but it's typically a bone dry kind of wine. And you'll pick up that minerality in the old world Riesling, where you might not pick that up. It's more fruit forward in the new world. And if you do get a Riesling from the Wachau region, it has this petrol kind of taste to
This
it.
is, somebody was talking about this on a show the other day about diesel. And I'm like,
Diesel, yes.
what? Because, I've kind of tasted that before, but I'm like, what's wrong with this wine?
And it's
That
what
people
they're
like it, yeah.
recognized for is that
Yeah.
petrol. I'm not crazy about it, but it's fun
Yeah.
to do that comparison.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've tasted that before thinking, maybe it's me, maybe like, has this not aged or something? You know what I mean? Because
Right.
I did not know this was part of that at all.
Yeah.
And then somebody mentioned, I think it was Linda Casale, our friend, and I'm like, Linda, you don't say that. And she goes, oh,
Right.
yes, I do. I'm like, what? That it was diesel, petrol kind of thing. So that's an
Right.
interesting, balance. The other I wanted to ask, what is Beaujolais? Am I pronouncing it?
Yeah. It's typically the first grapes that are harvested in France.
Okay.
And they're not aged long. It's like when you get a Beaujolais, which typically comes out around Thanksgiving or close to Thanksgiving. That's why it's served a lot then. It's drink it. It's not an ageable wine. Typically, it's something that you can enjoy. It's very typically fruit forward.
Yeah, it's pretty light though. From I
Very
remember
light.
having some and only seeing it like you're saying around that time frame, going,
Yeah.
I wonder what this is about, because even the color is different.
Right.
It's almost
exactly.
brownish to me. I'm like going, what is this? And it didn't
Right.
taste. Nothing negative about it. I was
No.
just like, I wonder what this is about. You just don't
Very
hear about
young.
it.
Right, very
Okay.
young, and just enjoy it for what it is, and it's kind of the first taste of the vintage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
good.
yeah,
Since we're talking about all these world of wines, I'm like, okay, let's go for it.
yeah.
But now, what about fruit wines? Is that something that you would consider new world, or something that everyone makes according to what their region produces?
Right, and so fruit, any kind of fruit can be fermented, and you can make alcohol
Yay.
out of it. So apples and cherries and whatever. A lot of that is done in the Midwest and up in northern Michigan and so on. They have a lot of fruit that they then ferment into wine, and so I would call that more of new world kind of styling of winemaking is. But yeah, you could do just about anything. Even like New York does a lot of Concord grapes that they grow there. Yeah, and of course that's not for winemaking typically. That's more for juices and so on. But they grow.
Actually, we met a grower,
Did you?
Concord, and he took
Okay.
us out in the vineyards in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Oh,
So
okay.
Buffalo is right there. I mean, you could see New York, like the
Yeah.
borderline was there. And they I wish I could remember their winery was really good. But he grows Concord grapes for Concord. And what I didn't understand is that they actually own shares.
Oh, wow. Okay, sure.
It's actually kind of cool. And he says, when it's harvest, you want to be the first in line to get there. It's like this whole thing. It was one of the most fascinating things. But so he took us through and he was like, now, do you think this is going to be for wine or Concord? And so like we had to learn the vineyards as he was taking us around, but you could see the lake and you could see Canada from the top. And I mean, it was gorgeous. I mean,
it sounds like
it was so much fun. I'm just like, this is a blast. But so he does that, and then that helps fund the winery literally to get started. That's how they were able to do that. And so he does, like when it's harvest time, you don't see him ever. About that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Harvest time, don't even call. Do not disturb the winemaker.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the wine regions in the US.
Yeah.
Of course, New World wines. Obviously, the number one wine growing region in the US by far is California, right? They're
Sure.
producing over 80% of the wine and grape production in the country. But can you tell me what state has the least amount of wineries in it?
Okay, I would say, okay, there's three that I would say. I know Missouri kicks some butt, some wine
Yeah,
butt. They do really
yeah.
good. We've had, I think it's Stonewall that was on Stonehill. It's on our show years ago, and they actually managed to save their Norton grapes during Prohibition. There was one
Correct.
little vine left, and they're like, "You're not touching this. Leave our wine."
Right.
Anyway, they did that. But I would say it's going to be a toss up between Hawaii, Alaska, in regards and Texas. But Texas does, I know Texas wines, but sometimes they outsource or
Right.
insource.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They import. Yep.
Import.
But
Thank you. There's the word. Yeah.
it's actually Mississippi.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah,
Has
that
a,
makes sense. I don't think I've ever seen a vineyard in Mississippi.
I
Now
think
that
there's only two, if that.
oh, I better go. Nancy and I better go. We better go see them. They need some customers. We need
Right.
more.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have California, and you have I think comes next is Oregon, obviously,
Oh,
and
yeah, that makes
Washington
sense.
and
Yeah.
Washington State. And from there you drop, they're in the 700 wineries in those, for Washington and Oregon. And then California, I can't remember, there are thousands, like 4,000 wineries in California. So then after Oregon, you drop down to New York in the high 300s, or maybe they're over 400 wineries now. And they're known for their Concord grapes, as we were talking about, but you're starting to see them be known for their Riesling and Merlot blends primarily, and rosés. Our beautiful rosés are coming out of New York. And I think there's basically two major regions, like the Finger Lakes and the North Fork area, that have wine growing. Then you come down to Virginia with 300 or more wineries in Virginia now, and they're mostly around where Thomas Jefferson's Monticello
Yeah.
is. Yeah, so I think that's Charlottesville, Virginia, and then Texas. Texas now has
Texas, very interesting wine.
right.
We've done some shows with Messina Hoff Winery, and then there's a wine Los
Sure.
Pinos up
Yeah.
in Gladewater area, which is they went from oil to wine, to antiques and wine, but they're up. So they're kind of northeast Texas, and
Okay.
honestly, they did. They were starting to grow their own grapes there, which was a big deal because
Right.
it just Texas, and I know where we are today recording in Lubbock. A lot of people get grapes from here. So I know they have
Right.
wine, but we had wine here and it had meat in it. So it was a lead like sweeter
Yeah.
side of things,
Uh-huh.
a little
Uh-huh.
different. But Northeast, they were starting to grow their own, doing more Tempranillo style.
Yes.
And that their
Yes.
Tempranillo
Yes.
was really good. I mean,
Yes.
really, yeah, Nancy's got one of their bottles. They had like 2 cases left or something from the library.
Wow.
And yeah, we drank it under a full moon and
Nice.
in a
Nice.
park. It was awesome. But yeah, so I find Texas very interesting, and I wonder about the connection with Arizona, because when you talk about terroir, I was wondering about, so like we've done shows on wines in Washington State and Oregon, right? And
Right.
some of them are part of the Ice Age trail. So when the Ice
Right.
Age came through and there's all this volcanic stuff going on and
Right.
all this crazy geology, right? Then there's the wineries in Colorado, like we went through in Palisade and Grand Junction,
Correct.
incredible wine. Now, what's interesting, they've got the Colorado River
Right.
going through, and I'm going, okay, so if this is part of the Colorado Plateau, isn't that going to connect to your region? So you're kind of sharing, not just by state, as you're saying, but
Right.
like, wouldn't it, the terroir kind of follow these geological plateaus and rivers and that kind of thing?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
Like in the Wachau Valley, all along the Danube. It's a river that runs through those 4-5 countries, and it influences the terroir of all of those regions along that river. So, and that doesn't, it crosses country boundaries. It doesn't, and it does have that influence. So you see that worldwide. But you also see, just like in our region, I'm 1,000 foot higher on the mountain, so I'm closer to the higher peaks on the Chiricahua mountain. And of course, we have a lot of rivers that flow off from that. I have Ash Creek that flows out of the mountain, and just about a mile away, you have another major creek that flows out of the mountain. And our soils are very different in that little bit. And if you go 1,000 feet down that mountain to where the majority of grapes are grown in Arizona, the soils are totally different than my soils, because I have more of the volcanic soils from when that mountain blew.
That's right, Chiricahua. You got all those hoodoos.
I do. And then farther down, it's more loamy soil because of the water flow, and they're closer to a playa, an underground water source in that area. So the terroir can stretch along miles and miles, hundreds of miles, or it can be very narrow in the difference. But it is defined by you're correct, it's defined by the geographical areas or features.
Well, yeah, because in Colorado, the wines there were exceptional. Like I really didn't
That's what I
expect
hear.
much.
Yeah.
And they do a wine Semillon. I don't know if
yes, no, you're correct.
but they said that mostly people use it as in part of blending, but they're
Correct.
doing it pure. Like, okay, what do you call it? It's like, boom, here's your single shot, but it's really balanced and minerally, their wines are very minerally. However, what's fascinating is the way they're really on that plateau part. So the way the river goes, like you could have a winery on one side of the river and buy like Mount Garfield, and then one downriver, maybe as a crow flies 2 miles, completely different. The microclimates there are insane, like really different because of the way the water flows. Like in this, it winds.
Yeah.
So because of the curves, I think, and then because of the mountains, like they've got these buttes. I called them the butts, but the buttes change how the wind blows, and so if you're by a butte, you're going to have difference than being in the foot. It's really different, man.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the thing, what you're saying about travel, like just to like go through your area. I mean, you've got Elgin, and so Elgin will be a little bit different than your wine, right? Elgin's
absolutely. Yep, absolutely. They are similar in altitude, but they don't have the mountain range as high as we do with the Chiricahuas. And as we've talked in the past, mountains create their own weather, and the winds that come off the mountain and come down drain down those creeks or rivers that come out of mountains, it creates their own weather. And that's how we get that diurnal temperature shift, that 15 to 20 degree difference between the daytime temperatures and the nighttime temperatures, which is critical for producing really quality wine. We get that from the mountains and the winds and the weather that's created by them. And I'm sure that's what Colorado is experiencing, why they're growing finer wine grapes. And I think that's why it's more difficult in a place like Texas, because you have the heat and you have the humidity, which we don't have the humidity like Texas does, but they don't have the geographic features like mountain ranges or
it's different because you can go from the swamps with alligators down to like Martha and Big Bend area, and you're talking about really dry, that's more of the I was going to say not the Chiricahua. Yeah, it is a Chiricahua desert. Like you're on that border too. You're kind of in that zone of where the Sonoran meets the Chiricahua desert too. So that's another interesting. No wonder you had a volcano. Like she's like, I want to be Hawaii. I want to do that. That's really cool. I do want to touch on with Mother's Day coming and Memorial Weekend. Memorial Weekend really kind is the unofficial start to summer, and people
Yeah.
start barbecuing. I know in Arizona, y'all are already out there and playing in
Right.
the pool, but the rest of the world, I mean, I was looking at a friend right now is going through snow up in Michigan. So I'm like, dude, this lesson for us is like, wait until
Right.
July, maybe to go back up there. But, so that's kind of people are gathering. So wines for gatherings, is this a good time to bust out the charcuterie board, like for Mother's Day? That's really, I think a charcuterie day for
Yeah.
mom would be a good idea.
Perfect. Yes, it's a perfect time to put together their charcuterie board. And I think I got some great tips online for people to how to put together the perfect charcuterie board and pair it with wine. If you're putting a lot of different cheeses as well as different kinds of meats and sausages on it, you might want to have a couple different wines for people to try with it. And, this time of year, pick a rosé. We just released a 2020 Rosé of Grenache that is just phenomenal and would be a perfect thing to pour for mom on Mother's Day.
I want to tell people in the show notes, we'll have links to Peggy's tips on the charcuterie board. You also even do wine and chocolate pairings, and that might be one might want to do that for mom too. There's a lot of chocolate going on, for Mother's Day.
Absolutely.
I know what Nancy wants.
Yeah, a lot of people give gifts of chocolate. Pair it with wine, buy also a bottle of wine that's going to go perfect with that box of chocolates. So really treat mom nice this year.
And I think doing something on your, like, okay, you could get the box of chocolates like you're saying, but if you're there, I think it's cool to create something special for her, because it's time to be hands-on. Like, as a mom, making a handmade card for Nancy means more to her than, because you spent some time and thought and, what does she enjoy? Like if I put birds on the card, she's going to be happy. If I give her wine, she's going to be very, very happy.
Right.
But to actually do the plate yourself.
Right. Exactly.
I think it's a good idea. And kids can get involved to do it too.
Absolutely. And I'd go one step further, is to write a couple memories of your mom. And so, for example, a special occasion in my household didn't occur if there wasn't a bottle of wine or several on the table. My mom always thought a special celebration or a special event meant that you had to have wine on the table.
Yes.
And so, she taught me all about how to entertain and how to really be inclusive with folks and make people feel at home, because we always had strangers at our dinner table that became family members soon after the dinner. So tell a story about what you remember about your mom and how they impacted your life. I think is really special.
That's really something that ties into a conversation I had. Lee Brovadania is the trust architect. She teaches trust to corporations and workshops on business. But then she's kind of changing in her career a little bit. It's all about emotional intelligence. And she has become an end-of-life doula, soul journey doula. So she helps people prepare for their passing, helps them deal with families. And her whole thing, her last article is about what is your legacy going to be? And to think about when someone's passing, it's not those, oh, you did this, do this. It's those moments, those fleeting moments where you saw someone do something amazing. It's you know what I mean? It's not a resume.
Yes. No, it's not a resume.
It's those little things, like, she said that, so-and-so always made me laugh. Like if my mom always made me laugh when I fell down, like, if I fell down, there was like, oh, what did you do to the ground? Not like, oh my God, everybody stop. Lisa fell, let her cry. No. You know what I mean? It's like, there's those kinds of things, those anecdotes, but it is about legacy.
Right.
And I think people sometimes forget that everyone's in their own way creating a legacy. So what you're saying at the table, remembering and sharing those moments are really a big deal to someone. And you never know, time is short and fleeting and things happen in life. I really believe, tell them now.
Tell them now. Exactly. Yeah. That's so important. And I just think I mean, I have so many memories around wine because I think it's like food.
That's your legacy.
It's my legacy, but I mean, because we share experiences and we
Yes.
share, meals and wine with people that we love or people that we, care about, and sharing those memories are very important. I think it provides the connection to us and each other, and I think it's do that with Mom this year.
I love it. I love that you also look at things as entertaining and tasting, and for being all inclusive, because there's so many times, and we've talked about this on the show before, but people are new to tasting wine,
right?
And have them taste the wine, but describe it like I think we were talking about that time when it was brown bagged all the wine and nobody knew what was in it. Describe the wine according to your career. Gave people a way to actually slow down and taste. Nobody had to be a wine snob here. That wasn't allowed. This was a way of tasting, and it was all inclusive. So people got to know each other's careers. They got to know just a different way. And it wasn't like, oh, you don't taste this. Well, then, if you don't taste diesel, you're stupid kind of thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So to me, when that's a good way for Mother's Day is like, okay, taste this wine and think of a memory that goes with the wine. That's kind of cool, right?
Love
to do that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Love that.
that's like a childhood memory. Like if it's spunky, you go, okay, remember when I snuck out of the house? This wine's got that kind of, vibration to it that,
I love that. That's a great idea.
I love it where people can learn in a different way.
Correct.
And go in not thinking they have to have read the book of wine to go there, so that's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I would say also in the show notes, everyone, I'm putting a link to Peggy's recipe for you did poached chicken breasts in the Grenache.
Correct.
With the Grenache, and you pair that with the rosé that you're talking about. Real quick question on that. Do you really use your own wine in cooking? Like, because your wine is so good, it makes me nervous to cook with it.
No, yeah, I mean, you're not going to use that much usually, except like if you're doing a stew and you're going to have to use a whole bottle of it. But I know
that's sacrilegious.
It will. It does. It makes the pairing better when you cook with the wine that you're going to be drinking, I think. But if you, but make sure if you don't choose the wine you're going to drink, but make sure you cook with a drinkable wine. Don't cook with what's it called? The wine or something like that.
Don't do that thing in that white box thing.
Right. Don't do that. But cook
don't use Boone's Farm, in other words.
Right. And cook with a wine that is, similar. So you don't want to cook with a sweet wine. You don't want, it needs to be a similar to what you're serving kind of wine. But
I love it. I love it. Everyone, look in the show notes for the recipe, the charcuterie, chocolate pairing tips, all of that. So it gets you stepped up and ready for Mother's Day, for Memorial Weekend, even 4th of July. Actually, it's kind of like, hey, we're getting ready for spring and summer. Well, summertime. Areas we're still looking for spring, but also I've got a link in there for the crossword puzzle, the World of Wine crossword puzzle, and that is going to be very cool because I think we have 50 countries represented, like I don't know, something crazy, but good luck with that one. It's a online crossword puzzle, and it's got a link to a wine music playlist on Spotify. So we're going to put Peggy's interview on there so you can learn, listen, and good luck. And if anybody can finish it, I want to know. Because I can't finish my own one. So you know what I mean? And if there's any mistakes, Nancy and I were drinking wine when we made it. So I'm just saying. But thank you, Peggy. Always a blast. Peggy again is here every first Wednesday. Keep up with them at ldvwinery.com. If you're in Arizona this summer and this spring, go check them out in Scottsdale. And also the winery, that's by appointment only, right, Peggy, and for special events?
Correct. And Harvest Toast.
Oh, yeah. Harvest Host. If you're RVing across the country, check them up on Harvest Host. And Harvest Host is cool. It's a great way for people to stay in unique places that are not RV parks, but you have to be self-contained.
Correct.
I don't know if I'm self-contained, but anyway, but keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. Thank you so much, Peggy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.